All right, we're back with another episode of the Miserable Podcast. We are here with Kenny K. Soul Thompson. Kenny?
I'm here with you.
We are here with Polly Pie Howard.
Apple pie.
Yep.
We're going to get into this episode, and hopefully today, Polly won't bang on the table.
Not making any promises.
Not making any promises. So we have a great episode lined up for you today. We had a good time recording last night. Had Phil in the building. Had a good time. Had a great podcast last night about balance.
I got jealous.
You got jealous.
I was like, oh, that's a good conversation.
You had to sit behind the camera and listen to it.
Yeah.
I felt that too during the Casual Friday yesterday. And I know, Paulie, you felt it during the What is Success? Yeah. So we've all had the experience of being behind the camera during a great conversation and just wanting to butt in. We could add a microphone, but we don't because we're weird.
Yeah. One day I'm just going to walk up and say what I need to say and go back and sit down.
And we'll edit it out. Today we're going to have a good conversation as soon as Paulie figures out his cord. He said his cord is weird.
His is looks like it's pulling on you.
I mean, he was fine. So he's a grown man. He can take care of himself.
Just trying to help.
I've gotten this far.
Forgive me.
We're in a rare mood this morning. This is earlier than we usually record, so I think we're just in a different mindset than we normally are. Maybe
more energy, more awake.
I don't know. Maybe the opposite, because this is normally when I have like my 2 p.m.
slump.
Yes. Yeah, I'm normally like sucking down coffee right now, just trying to keep functioning. And I don't have coffee in front of me. I have an empty mug for product placement purposes. Even though we're not selling the mug, should we sell it at some point? You let us know. Reach out to us via channels of internet communication and let us know if you want a miserable mug or not.
You have 5 minutes. Go.
From the time of this recording.
To buy it or to suggest to buy it?
Both.
All right. So today, it's always about 2.5 minutes. I just looked down. About 2.5 minutes, I have an alarm that goes off in my head that's like, you actually have to do the podcast or people are going to stop listening. So we're at just past 2.5 minutes. So let's go ahead and get into today's topic of podcasting. This is something we've talked about a lot as friends for years. And I'm excited to actually try to hash it out in a structured type conversation here. So as with all of our podcasts thus far, we usually decide on a topic about 5 minutes before we press record, and then we talk about other things until we press record. So when we start recording, it's all really fresh and candid, and we're just having a conversation among friends, and we just wanted you to come along for the ride. So the conversation today we'd like to have is just about getting started with whatever it is that you have a vision for, that you want to do. You have a plan, you have a goal, an idea. We're going to talk about that process of getting started, specifically in the context of doing it with what you have and where you are. So a lot of times we put constraints on ourselves and say, man, once I get this, once I do this, once I'm at this place, then I'm going to do XYZ. What we found, I think, in our personal experience and what we've learned from people who have done much bigger and better things than us, is that really the best way to do it is to just do it.
Right.
Whatever you have, wherever you are, taking the first step is just what you always need to do. And that may look different with different things, with different ideas, with different goals or purposes, whatever. But we experienced that with the Miserable Company because we did a lot of kind of our knowledge and our skills surpassed our budget in a lot of ways. And we've had the opportunity to work with different organizations and get our hands-on red cameras or black magic type things, or I've had the opportunity to work in some really killer studios, and you've had the opportunity to be on some awesome sets and things that corporately or that these organizations just have had amazing equipment, and we're just like, man, we want to do similar things, but we may not have all of those things. So we had to go through that process. What do you guys think about somebody who has an idea, such as the Miserable Company or whatever it may be, but kind of has things or places or kind of what they see as necessities or something that they just need to have before they can get started? How do you feel about that disposition in general?
This subject is something I'm very passionate about, just because this is how I got into filmmaking, is just starting with what I have. And I feel like what people usually do is they have an idea, they have a vision, and a lot of those things just kind of never come to be because of the lack of a budget or certain equipment or just certain tools at their disposal. And what happens in the long run is they end up doing nothing at all. So I mean, I know that's just kind of like a really broad answer to that question, but I just feel like getting started is very important in order to get to a place to where you can actually attain the things that you need and you can really make the kind of complete the vision. So I just think that a lot of people don't think about that, and they focus on what they can't do instead of focusing on what they can do. And in the long run, it just kind of eventually you just don't do anything, because we could be sitting around still talking about what we need for the Miserable Company instead of just using what we have, sitting down and making a podcast.
Right. I mean, because we talked about, we filmed that first podcast, that technically first podcast that never was really released. And we had an idea, and we set it all up, and we tried to use the gear that we had. It looked good, but
literally miserable podcast.
There was just so many technical limitations by doing it that way.
Well, explain them so like people get an understanding.
Okay, so we set up 3 DSLRs, and they have recording time limits. And a lot of podcasts, especially with what we're doing, they're not, going to be within that 20 to 30 minute period. So we were having to get up every time.
Stop the podcast, stop the conversation,
right?
Stop the cameras, restart the cameras.
Exactly.
And say if we did that 3 times with 3 cameras, you had 9 files for one video.
Right.
That you had to all then sync the groups of 3 and then edit together.
Along with the audio and everything. Yeah. So, I mean, it was just a nightmare in the post world. And now we're still in a similar situation, right? Where my phone is not on vibrate and it's on the table, so it wouldn't matter anyway. We're in a similar situation now. Everybody else is putting their phones on vibrate.
Double checking.
We're in a similar situation now where the video, like time limitations, we don't have, because now we're filming on a Hero 8, a GoPro, but it doesn't look that good.
Right.
There's noise issues. But I mean, we can, and we're working towards, we have plans for improving and all that. But I mean,
this week actually, we will be making an upgrade to that. So,
but if we continued to wait, you know what I mean, we would have been not recording any podcasts until, basically the end of January. We would have had nothing to put out
right
at the new year.
Also, I think there's an importance to getting started, because that's how you get better. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when you don't get started and you wait until you have like this better equipment, your craft, your skill, whatever you're trying to do can never improve as much as it could if you just start now.
Right. Well, I mean, there's like, just in my journey as a photographer, I value a lot. And I mean, even as I've gotten better and as I've gotten better gear, I've never had the best. I still don't. And I've been doing this for like 15 years. So like, I'm still running like, the baseline lenses. I have a good camera, but now it's like from its original release date. Now it's like 4 or 5 years old. and it has feature limitations that current cameras don't have and things like that.
Right.
But I really credit the early portion of my journey with only having for like 2 or 3 years, only having my my camera and a single kit lens, and I shot weddings with just that. Like I shot a couple weddings with, at the time, the entry level DSLR Nikon, a D40, and the 18 to 55. And then the second lens I bought was the 35 millimeter.
Would you say that's made you a better photographer? If you would have started with the best lenses versus maybe like a kit lens?
Right. Well, I think I don't know if I could say it made me a better photographer, but it made me appreciate and understand better the technical side of things, because I didn't upgrade things until I reached a ceiling, and I was like constantly hitting those limitations. And then I was like, okay, I have to find a way to upgrade if possible. Whereas people that start out like, say, like, I'm just, just making up a situation. So say like you graduate from high school and you have, somebody gave you as a graduation gift, like $5,000, and you go out and you buy, a pro level camera body and a couple pro lenses to get started. Those people, I don't think they're necessarily going to find that they're not able to become as good a photographer because they don't have as low of a ceiling. But I think that it's possible that you won't gain that appreciation for your craft as early on, and for like the real, like, I mean, it's like shooting a film camera versus shooting a digital camera.
Right.
When back in the day when people shot film, and if they were documenting something important, like say a photojournalist or something like that, nowadays people are just like laying on the shutter shooting 500 images of said event, but back then you had 24, 36 maybe shots that you could take on a roll of film.
Right.
And the process of switching it over to get to another roll of film was time consuming. So, I mean, if you wanted to capture something important, if you wanted to share that story, you needed to do it within the limitations.
And I guess and that's what I was trying to ask you. I guess I shouldn't say a better photographer as far as like taking good pictures. I think what I really mean is like a better problem solver.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I can give you a wide variety of different pieces of equipment, because of your experience working on the lowest levels to the highest levels, you know how to make it work, versus always being given the best. And then now you get less than the best. It's like, I don't know what to do with this.
Well, I would say from a music production standpoint, in my case, a lot of the better equipment in music production, microphones, whatever it may be, the real intent of them, and I guess it's like this in film and everything, lighting, lenses, is to do less in post.
Yeah.
It's supposed to make what you're capturing closer to what the final product is.
Yep.
So I would say in music production, you start out with a $30 microphone that you're trying to compete with $5,000 microphones. So what it causes you to do is you have to learn EQ a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have to learn,
Sure.
For instance, like in this room, I'm in my headphones right now. Being an audio engineer, I hate the room noise, but this is like our temporary setup.
Right.
It is what it is. We've taken some very small measures, but there's going to be some room noise. But I have tools and an understanding that I can go in and at least make it a little bit better.
Right.
That if I had a perfect studio setup, I would never learn that aspect. And I may never understand. So what it's caused me to do is, with cheaper equipment or recording albums with Farflung on a boat, moving boat in the Amazon.
With a blaring engine.
With engines and winds and birds, I have had to confront problems, like you mentioned, and challenges that if I would have woke up, in the world's finest studio, I would have never learned
Sure.
how to deal with those issues. So, and that's good experience to get initially. So, and you can see this, and there's examples of this just throughout history. You could say one person I think about, believe it was Warren Buffett, okay, who now is one of the richest people ever, and through investing mainly, and I'm 90% sure this was Warren Buffett, but he starting his business when he was very young. I believe he wasn't even like 18 yet. He was young. He was had an idea. People were sitting in the barbershop just waiting, and he said, "These people are bored." And pinball machines were like huge. And he's like, "Man, if there was a pinball machine right there, it would make a lot of money because people are stuck here and they're bored waiting." So, like, from what I understand, he took like whatever he had, all the money he had, and was just like, "I'm going to buy a pinball machine, and I'm going to go to barbershops and find somebody who wants a pinball machine, and I'll just tell them we'll split the profits." So it's something for their customers. It's a way for me to make some money. So goes out and gets this pinball machine. And what he did to legitimize himself is he pretended that he worked for a larger corporation. So he goes into this barbershop and says, "Hey, this is what we do. I work for such and such. We're going to sell you this pinball machine. You're going to put this pinball machine in your barbershop. You take half of it. We take half of it." I mean, it's simple. You're making more money. It's for your customers and me. And they're like, "Okay, that's fine." So he takes this pinball machine under the guise of this larger corporation, an entity, and puts it in there. Well, it was so successful, he goes to collect the money one day, and the guy who owned the barbershop says, "Hey, I like this. I want another one." So instead of just going, "Okay, I'll get you another one," he said, "Oh, well, I'll have to talk to my boss." There's no boss, and the message there is his issue was that he was just a kid. But instead of sitting around saying, "Well, one day I'll grow up and I can run a business," he just said, "Hey, what's the problem? The problem is nobody's going to want to buy from me because I'm a kid.
Mhm.
So what do I have to do?" Well, in his case,
Pretend like there's
I have
someone
to
else behind
pretend
the
like there's a
curtain.
giant entity behind me. And
Yeah.
it worked out for him,
Genius.
very
Yeah.
well. So, and you can see that there's stories of like Donald Trump pretending to be his own publicist before he had a publicist. Things like that. And I think there's similar things with like Mark Cuban, where these people were, like broke and sharing apartments, but going out and pretending like they were just big shots. And,
Right.
And they did it. So what it caused them, because they didn't have the resources or the backing or when they were just getting started, they were problem solvers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, that's one example and a practical business example. But for us, it's the same issue. So you want your videos to look like this person's, but you don't have his equipment. So what can you do?
Right.
And what it does is that lack of equipment then, I think, causes you to grow, as opposed to just relying on that. So along those lines, I think probably the best message in this for somebody, say it's somebody who, any type of business that somebody wants to start, I think the right kind of mindset is, instead of saying, "Well, I can't do this, I want to do this, and I don't have that," I think the best way to start is start, okay, what can I do?
Right.
What do I have? And that's kind of where we were at with the Miserable Company, where we said, "Well, let's do this. And you say, "You know what, let's just launch. Okay, what do we have right now? This will do it. This will do it." Now, we could have done it a lot more complicated in the old setup, and it would have looked a lot better. But we said, "Okay, let's be realistic.
Yeah.
What's sustainable, and what's a decent workflow?" So I think about people. I think about my wife, who's doing calligraphy, and it's kind of taken off, and she's doing weddings and stuff. At the beginning, it was like, "Well, I just feel like there's people that are so much better than me." Well, that's fine.
Yeah, they are. There are.
There
always will be.
There always
Yeah,
will be.
exactly.
And we always go back to the subjective nature of things. But like, that doesn't matter. If somebody comes to you, then they want you, and you do that. So focus on what you can do and what you do have. Well, I don't have these big mirrors and stuff like that. Well, either figure out a way to get them, or offer something else, or, you know, and it's funny because she's done that. And she said, people want this, so she just builds it in the price so she can get that thing. Well, now she has that resource, and you can see this thing kind of growing and growing, but it has to start from that place of, okay, I may not be the best, but I can do this. And I may not have the best, but I do have this.
I think you also have to embrace that there are people better than you. Like, that's part of the game. And one thing that I've kind of told myself, like, for example, if I'm filming a wedding, there's people that can shoot a wedding film a lot better than me. They have bigger crews than me. They have better equipment than me, but nobody can tell a story the way I can. And that's why people are going to come to me. And that's, you know, not to sound cliche or corny, but that's
it's not even, you're not even saying like that you're necessarily better than someone else telling a story. It's just your approach and your
style,
like your uniqueness.
Okay,
is what people are coming for.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's something that you develop too, because if you don't get started with what you have where you are, and, you know, like speaking like about your wife and stuff, and you never start putting that stuff out there, then people won't come to you for that vision. And you could talk about it too. You can say like, you know, talk to your friends like, oh, I want to be a filmmaker. I want to do this, that, and the other thing. And that's all well and good. But if you don't actually start putting something out there, allowing them to see that product,
there has to be some kind of action behind what you're talking about.
Right.
What's the, I cannot remember. Jeremy, I know you got this. What's the 10,000 hour book?
Outliers.
Outliers.
Yeah.
That's something I think about constantly. If it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything, wouldn't it make sense to get started as soon as possible?
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, you know, they just do themselves a disadvantage, including, and I'm not just trying to sound like I'm sitting on a pedestal talking down to anybody, but just when you're not starting, you're wasting that time, because putting in that time makes you a better at whatever it is.
I think part of that comes now. I think that mindset is more popular now than it used to be. Like, that negative thinking of it, like, you know, somebody else is better than me, because we see that so much with social media. Everybody's always putting their stuff out there, whether it be just personal stuff or their professional stuff they're putting out there, and we're consuming, and it's a lot of that stuff is being put in front of our face more frequently. Whereas, like, you know, in days like the story you told about Warren Buffett, I mean, he was like, you know, I'm with American Pinball Company or whatever. Nobody could look that up and see that he was fibbing. Nobody can see like, oh, well, why would we go with your company when this is the company that's known for that? You know what I mean? So I think it's much more prominent now that people have that hesitation, because they see so much that's out there that other people are doing, and they're like, I'll never be that good.
Yeah. It's just such a danger. With my YouTube channel, a lot of people watch me, and I would say on a monthly basis, I'm having a conversation with someone because they're looking for advice or just, I guess, some kind of motivation. Like, hey, man, I saw you on YouTube and I want to do the same thing, and like, give me some advice. And I always, you know, I have these conversations, and I give my advice from a technical aspect, and I'll just, you know, just as much as I can give, as much information as I can give them. And the number one excuse is like, well, I don't have a camera right now.
Sure.
And I'm like, what are you talking to me on? Or, you know, what are we messaging on? They're like, my phone.
Yeah.
And I always give examples. I'm like, there's people on YouTube with millions of subscribers who just refuse to upgrade to a DSLR, any type of, you know, bigger camera, because it's so convenient to shoot on their phone, and they've gotten so good that it looks great. And I say, that can be you. So a lot of those people, I'm not going to say all of them, a lot of those people, even now, and I've talked to them, you know, over the past year, and they still haven't done anything. Mm-hmm. And I feel bad because they have some really good ideas, and I'm like, that's an amazing idea. You should do that, definitely. And they're like, I'm gonna wait till I get a camera in like 3-4 months. I think that's the plan. 3-4 months come, and I'll hit them up. And
and you know, without realizing, in the meantime, without the camera, with just your phone, you could become much more adept at editing.
Yeah.
You could become much better
Yeah.
at being in front of the camera.
Yeah.
You could become much more aware of how you look in front of the camera and your mannerisms just by starting. And then when you do get your camera, you've already built that foundation.
Yep.
So you can and I think that's what people kind of misunderstand is that
That's good.
it scales,
Right.
you know. So you are just as important. Let me back up. You are much more important than the equipment you're using. And I will say that definitively. And somebody could try to argue against me, but I have watched people, musicians, on cruddy instruments, photographers on cruddy cameras. I've seen amazing things like short films or whatever that were done on equipment that people have sitting at their house. I've heard recordings, especially you think about the old recordings on these ribbon microphones on tape that are amazing. You know what I'm saying? There's
Yeah.
no like the bit depth, no resolution. Like it's like it, and of course there's a nostalgic point of that too. But like the person operating the thing really determines the outcome of the idea or the creative entity, whatever.
100%.
More so than the that equipment itself.
Yeah.
Sure. And as far as the equipment goes, I mean, there's almost always something that you could like some aspect of it that you could improve. You know what I mean? So like, I'm like losing my train of thought.
I think of it like this. If I have a camera, I'm not extremely adept at cameras. I know as much about ISO as you have told me. That's it. You know, and that's really all I care to know. You know, an aperture and all of these different things. Like I don't know much, but I've been with Farflung in different countries holding a camera and thought like, hey, I'm recording. This is cool. And Stephen Kawakami comes up behind me. He's like, hey, check this out. Presses a couple buttons, and I'm like, whoa, that looks good. You know, and it's like that piece of equipment is important, but the knowledge of the person holding that equipment makes all of the difference.
Yeah.
And you can begin to learn those things even without the equipment, especially now, like you mentioned phones. Like there's a pro mode on my camera, and it's got all of those options and even explains to you what they're for and how to use them. Like, and that may not give you're not a photographer after that. That's a whole nother podcast. What is a photographer? But like, but that can build a foundation just by doing that. Did you get your train of thought back?
No, but I'll say on what you're saying, like, I'm just thinking about my history and kind of going back a second, like when I had just that one camera and that one lens and the tech wasn't there yet where it is now, like I couldn't take it. First of all, my camera only did pictures, so I couldn't shoot any video. I couldn't take any pictures above 400 ISO if I wanted them to be, if you wanted to even know what was in the shot.
Wow.
Especially in the dark.
You
like,
really had to get creative.
So you know what I'm saying? Like, so I had to learn. I was challenged by my equipment in the situations that I was in to learn how, like, the technical side of taking a picture worked.
Yeah.
The aperture and the ISO and your shutter speed. Like I had to understand, okay, I'm in a situation, it's kind of dark. I need to brighten my scene. I have 4 options. But if you just have the camera, you have 3 options. You can slow your shutter speed down, but then if your subject is moving, it's going to be blurry.
Yeah.
You can open up your aperture. But my kit lens only went to 3.5 and only went to 3.5 when I was fully at the full width of the focal length.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to get a little bit closer at 55 millimeters, it was at 5.6. So I was at 3.5 to 5.6 limitation, so I couldn't open my aperture up anymore to brighten it. and my ISO limitation was good luck after 400.
Gosh, that's crazy.
So the thing I had to do was I had to start understanding beyond those technical things. How can I use my available light to my advantage?
Right.
If I don't have a flash with me, if I don't have constant lights, if I'm at a concert and I'm shooting like, a performance or something like that, I had to wait and find the moments when the available light was optimal.
Yeah.
And that just it enabled me to have a greater appreciation and a greater understanding for how things can improve.
Right.
Like when I got something better, when I started, incorporating off-camera lighting, it allowed me to understand that at a foundational level to build off of. Whereas if I went in with everything, I had top of the line lighting, and all of my lenses went down to 2.8 or 1.2, I would have never appreciated, I think, like the core of the craft as much.
Yeah.
And it would have been harder for me, I think, to have gotten better at the rate that I did if I had better stuff when I started out.
Another thing too is you'll never have the best equipment, at least not for long. I mean, a new camera body comes out every single year. So if you're really relying on equipment and that's like what you think is like, I have to have the best equipment to make the best content, every year you'll be going broke because every year I'm like, I gotta get the best. Oh, they're shooting in 8K now. I gotta, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, there's a lot of research. So we're looking at, we're talking about limitations and getting creative and things like that, and just the general growth. But there's a lot of research into how placing constraints on someone or having limitations actually increases creativity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of research into this.
That makes sense.
And that goes for creatives. So I can't remember who it was, but there's somebody I heard them talking about. They had a writing class, and in their writing class was like creative writing, and their professor's like, okay, you need to write a short story. And I was like, okay, I can do that. 1 page. I'm like, oh, I can do that. And every word has to start either with the letter T, C, or P. Go. And it's like, what? And it's like, the cheap person called the pirate, period. Okay. Then, comma, people came to the pirates' church cave, and it's like they had to write a short story with, and it's like,
I really want to know the rest of the story.
But like
Fascinating.
all of a sudden, it was easy to write a story because they were restricted in their options. So, and it's the same way with business. Well, there's inherent limitations on business: budget, time, markets, all of these things.
Yeah.
Work days, hours. It's like so as a entrepreneur, it's like, okay, I have to make X amount of sales, but I only have X amount of time and X amount of budget. How do I make this work? And that's when creativity plays its role in that. So limitations aren't necessarily a bad thing when it comes to equipment, when it comes to time, when it comes to your own personal. And for instance, one of the biggest personal contracts that I ever had, I had to get extremely creative because I was sitting in a room with 4 or 5 people. Were you with me in that original pitch meeting?
No.
I thought somebody was with me, but I didn't know. But I was sitting there across the room from 4 or 5 people saying, hey, this is a $20,000 plus contract. And they're like, you're telling me you can accomplish this? And I was being a salesman. I said, absolutely. And you're telling me, because everybody else is telling me that we can't do it, that they can't do it. But you're telling me, and this is what they said, we've been to the biggest studios in DC, Maryland, Virginia, this area. We've even reached out to people in New York. Everybody's telling me it can't be done. You're telling me that you can do it. Absolutely.
Did you do it?
I did. So, but the point was, I was in the meeting saying, and the way I structured the deal, at that moment, no, I couldn't do it. But if they agreed to the deal and I got my first payment, then yes, we
Yeah,
could
that
make it happen. I
deposit,
just had to
please.
make sure that we scheduled everything in time for me, that
Yeah.
I could actually go out and get the things that I needed in
Sure.
order to do it, which I placed all of those things in there. And so here it was, a lot of limitations on me. Didn't have the budget. I didn't have the equipment. So I had to get creative. Well, how do I get creative? Well, I write the deal this way.
Yeah.
And I write it for this much. And then I sell it in this manner. And if I can do that, then not only do I get this contract, but I get all this new equipment, some of which we're using right now. And, and it, what it did is, if I would have had everything, I would have gone, yeah, I can just, we could do this, we can do that. And sure, maybe it might have been a little bit easier, whatever. But it allowed me, here's my constraints, I got to work within those. And it allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
And that was one of the good examples. Not all of them have gone extremely well, or worked out. But, hey, and again, part of the reason that I was able to even have the confidence to say I could do it is because I had done other things, like recording on mountains and boats, and,
Right.
Yeah.
where I had said, listen, I even had a little, my explainer video said we've recorded on the side of mountains, wherever, and we've come up, of course I can do that here. If I did it there, I can do it here for sure.
If I can do it on the side of a mountain, I could do it inside of a room
A
in
building.
a church.
Yeah. Like no problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, but let's do this. Paulie, something we've talked about a lot, and you introduced me to this idea, and you can explain where you heard it, was the phenomenon of creatives, probably specifically, but it can go beyond that too, of these people getting gas. Will you tell us about that?
Gas.
The farts.
Paulie's the expert
The farts.
on gas.
I do have gas. Jeremy almost dropped his phone. So gas is, if you're a creative and you're listening to this, they probably know.
Yeah.
Stands for gear acquisition syndrome. Now, as far as I know, it's completely made up. It's not like
an actual medical,
a diagnosed
psychological
thing.
condition.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being one. But I first heard about it from a photographer that I've been following for years, Zach Arias. He's a photographer that I look up to very much. When I was pretty early on in my journey, he was doing a lot of educational content. His big thing back then was the One Light workshop. And his thing was like essentially what we're talking about, like he was showing people how to do off-camera lighting on a budget. So where a lot of people who were doing education at the time, they were shooting with these, top of the line Profoto and Ellen Chrome and all these big expensive brands, $2,000, $5,000 for one light. And he was like, here's this cheap, go on eBay, $20 Vivitar flash. Here's like, a couple bucks for a sync cord. And you could run the cord from your camera to the flash and you could do off camera lighting. Like you can get started for like $22 basically. And he was teaching people like how to make things work like that. But he also, as far as I know, I tried to look it up before, but I couldn't find anything definitive. But he's kind of the first one for me who coined the phrase gas or gear acquisition syndrome, which is essentially like the untamed desire to get all of the new stuff. Like that new camera is like, there's rumors coming out. You're on like Petapixel or like Canon rumors or Nikon rumors, and you're
Sony
like,
rumors,
right? And they're like, oh yeah, the new A7S3 is coming out, and it's gonna have, it's gonna be able to see like in pure darkness, like all that kind of
4K,
stuff.
60 frames,
right? And you don't even need it. I guess it's kind of what we're saying is like, starting with what you have, but I mean like, sure, there are situations where like that in a way is needed, but you don't need it.
Yeah.
but you want it really bad.
But I think there's a reason behind it.
Behind the want?
Yes, the motivation to that camera looks better, so I need it.
Sure, it could solve, these problems. Whatever situation that you say you've been in, and you're like, man, like this podcast. We're like, man, if we had a camera with a good sensor that can handle lower light, that can film without limitations of time, then we'd have something good.
Right. So I guess there's two parts of it.
Mhm.
Because in our situation, I think we could legitimately have something better.
Sure.
Like we are legitimately lacking
Yeah.
in the equipment department, at least for this week. I'm so excited to get this other stuff. There's that part of it. But I think there's another part. And I think it's that the equipment you have is fine.
Mhm.
But there's maybe an insecurity issue of like,
Hiding behind
why
the gear.
don't and this is how I'm phrasing it, and then I'll give somebody else's perspective that I'm reminded of. But like, why don't my vocals sound as good as everybody else's?
Mm.
And then it's like, oh, it's because
They're
my mic
using
is only
that.
$600 and they're using a mic that's $1,000. So I just need the $1,000 microphone. And the way Hugh McLeod, who wrote Ignore Everybody, he's a cartoonist, the way he puts it is it's like pillars to hide behind.
Mhm.
We use our tools as pillars. So instead of becoming better at our craft, we just say, I need a better microphone.
Right.
And there's truth in that, and that's not the point. But the way that he puts it is I really like that book, Ignore Everybody. And the way that Hugh puts it is that as you get better as an artist or in whatever you're doing, usually you need less tools because you figure out how to use the ones that you actually need. And you kind of filter through all of the things that are kind of pointless for you. And he puts it in terms of a painter. And I'm sure that there's truth to this, that once a painter perfects his style and gets better at his craft and understands the relationship between the types of paints, and I've painted some stuff before, and it's crazy how different paintbrushes, the length, the type of bristle, the different characteristic that each of those brushes have. So in my simple paintings that I used to do, I basically used two brushes. I just knew how to use those brushes. That's all I knew. I didn't understand anything about what types of paints or anything, but I just figured out those two. And I probably more so worked around the tools than finding the tools that maybe I had originally envisioned because I was so fresh at it. But I basically came to realize how much difference there are in brushes. Like this brush, I can't get to do anything. This one, it's actually doing what I want to do. So, but anyways, what he says is that when a painter actually develops their style and develops their skill, usually they start using less and less tools because they've honed in and they've learned and built a relationship with those things and they've learned how to use them. And so he says that a lot of times people use the big new things as a kind of pillars to kind of prop themselves up.
Yeah.
So, I have this camera, boom, that, and it's maybe out of this place, the way I see it, and probably how I've done it in the past is out of a place of insecurity. Because a lot of times, if somebody walks in to record with you and you do have $1,000 microphone sitting there, they don't even listen. It sounds good.
I think
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And being a creative, I've leaned on that probably sometimes. And I'm one of those people, I'm big on appearances. So you guys know, like when you walk in my workspace, it's like clean, everything is measured, it's like too OCD. But part of that for me is one way I could say it as well, it just instills confidence in your client that you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it makes them feel more comfortable. And that's it. That's part of it. But I think, if that's the angel on one shoulder, the devil on the other shoulder is like, it's because you're insecure. and that's your first pillar to step on. At least your workspace is clean and it looks like you know what you're doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there's probably truth both ways.
Yeah.
So I guess and we've talked about this too, that maybe the safeguard to gear acquisition syndrome, the safeguard to gas, is instead of just constantly going, oh, that's more expensive and it's better and I need it. Instead of actually getting there, is getting to a place where you outgrow the equipment that you do have. So, and if there's such a thing as just maximizing, now with what I have, this is the best possible thing that I can do in this scenario.
Yeah, there absolutely is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like you have an understanding of cameras. So you've got on that GoPro Hero 8, you've set all the settings based on where you're at, what we're doing. You've adjusted, you have a deep understanding of every aspect of that camera. You've set it the best that you could. Boom. We're maxed out on this thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to press record. Well, this looks like crap. We need a new camera. You know what I mean? Like, so you get to a point where you outgrow, and that's where I was a couple years ago before I bought the most expensive microphone that I have, which is right around $1,000. I was just like, I've done everything. I got plugins. I got preamps. This is the microphone. This is the best sound that I seem to get. And I reached out to a buddy of mine who makes like killer recordings, and I just thought his vocals were better than mine. And I'm like, can you please describe to me your vocal chain? Start with the hardware. Give me the software. Tell me what you're doing. And it was very similar to mine. The one difference was he was using a different microphone. So I pulled out some old microphones, put them on. I said, still not getting it. And I was doing my due diligence.
You found that limitation.
And I said, man, maybe that's the issue. So I ended up getting this microphone. I remember the first time I plugged the microphone in and did a recording, I was like, whoa, I've done nothing. And that's what I was waiting to hear, you know?
Yeah.
And could I still have been lacking in of course, I'm not saying that I figured everything out the best, but I think in that scenario, that might have been the issue where I had outgrown my equipment. Have you ever felt that outgrowing what you have?
Definitely. And I think I'm trying to figure out like a good example. I would say my camera. You know, when the first, I guess, good camera that I had was like a G7X Mark II. And I had learned how to use that camera very well. And I even still use it because I know how to make it look good, you know, for certain shots. But I got to a point where people started asking me to film stuff for them. And there were these limitations that I kind of ran into with the camera. And, you know, part of it being that the G7X is a point and shoot. There's no interchangeable lenses. So, you know, I couldn't shoot at different focal lengths and make it look a certain way. So then I upgraded and I got the ADD and I started doing a lot of paid work, and, you know, I made it look good. And it wasn't the fact that I just wanted a better camera. I had ran into limitations even in editing, in the color grading and things like that, and doing things in low light, that I've kind of like, all right, it's time to upgrade to a better equipment. Because just like you said, I did my research. I found out what other people were doing, and I was just like, okay, you know, it's just time to upgrade. And I think it's important, like you said, to wait till you get to a point, you know. I mean, if you have the money and, you know, you've been, you know, perfecting your craft, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting something a little bit better. But if you can learn all you can and get to a point where, okay, I've mastered this, you know, to a certain degree, now it's time to move on to the next thing so I can master that. And you're mastering and you're growing and you're getting to the next level each time. I think there's a lot of benefit to that.
It's kind of like learning a language. You can, you know, if you start learning a language, it's like, okay, first, this is the alphabet.
Yeah.
This is what it is. Okay, this is
built
the
on
sounds that they make. This is the sounds that they make when you put them together. Okay, now we're to words. So now let's look at some nouns. Okay, that's a ball, that's a door, that's a table. You know, and it's like, okay, you start going through. Now this is like people. This is how you address people. Okay, now let's build some verbs. Let's put some verbs in there. You know, it's like, okay, then you start building. And it's a lot of times like, you know, if you want to learn a language, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And you usually don't start with, let me read a technical textbook in this other language. That's what I need. That's how I'm going to start, because I want to learn all the words. I want to be able to say everything. So let me just pick up that textbook. It's like, man, you got to start from the simple things. And what's funny about that is they've looked at babies when babies are learning to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this was interesting because I'm witnessing it again with Miles, that babies, the way that they learn to speak and to communicate, they make noises. And they literally just start making noises with their mouth, and they begin to eliminate the noises that they don't recognize. So the process of learning how to speak their first language is by saying a bunch of gibberish and then getting rid of the things that they realize they don't need. So it's literally a process of elimination. So they've recorded these babies, and it's like they're making these random noises that we don't make in normal conversations. I'm not going to try to emulate one right now, but just
I was waiting for
speak
it.
like a baby.
Just work with me. And then what they do is slowly over time, the baby naturally, or however it happens, begins to eliminate those unnecessary sounds from their repertoire.
Yeah.
Until they begin then to use the sounds that they do need to actually form the words that we use to communicate. And it's an interesting way to look at it if you look at that from the slant of a business. You know, here we are, we're in Miserable Company, and we're talking about, all right, we're going to do all of these things. But then the caveat to all of that is like, we'll see. Maybe in 6 months, we're like, that's not working, or we don't need that.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like we try to figure out everything. Well, this is exactly what we're going to do, and this is exactly how we're going to do it. But you don't know. Sometimes you just got to make some noise, figure out what resonates, what makes sense, and what doesn't. And then if things don't make sense, if people don't like them, or if they're not communicating very well, you just begin to remove those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be in your ideas, but that can also be with the things you're using.
Yeah.
So it could be like, okay, well, we need, and this is exactly what we did with that first podcast. Well, we're going to use 3 cameras. We're going to use this. We're going to use that. And then now we're like, okay, we didn't need all of that. That didn't work. It didn't communicate well. It didn't translate well. Now we're down to the single camera because this is what is effective, and this is what is getting the job done. But you can't do that unless you just start making some noise.
Yep.
And you don't have to have the plan figured out. You don't have to have everything perfect. You don't have to have all of the things you want. You just got to start making some noise and then go from there.
There's a quote, I don't know who said it, and it's very simple, but it's to begin, wait, hold on.
Flunk.
Or the best the best way to start is to start. You know, like, it's, if you want to get somewhere, then go.
It's like,
Yeah.
It's
You
like
just have to.
Stephen Pressfield in the War of Art says the hardest part about writing is sitting down to write.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Like anybody can write. Writing's not hard. The hardest part is actually just doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's where you find that resistance all the time. It's like, hey, let's do a podcast. Oh, wouldn't it be great to do? You talk about today, you pulled up a note from 2 years ago. We were talking about, it'd be awesome to do a podcast. It's easy. Yeah. Doing a podcast is easy. This is not hard. We're sitting here talking with microphones. The hardest part about it is sitting down to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I think, I think today, what I would hope from this, our mission for the Miserable Company is to build a community and encourage that community. Specifically, just together to be committed to enjoying life. I mean, that is the whole thing. And I think for whoever is listening to this now or in the future, you know,
Or watching it,
you always throw that in there on me, that my goal today is that hopefully if somebody's listening to this and they've had an idea or they've had something that they've wanted to do, that you can walk away from this conversation and just go, you know what? I can do that now.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to really, really hold on to, is like, man, there's really no reason to wait. You'll never be the best. You'll never have all the stuff you want. You'll never, you just gotta go. You just gotta go. You just have to do it. You know, the longest journey starts with a step. You know, you hear all of these things, but it's so true. Like, so be encouraged today. Whatever you've had on your heart, whatever passions you have, whatever plans or dreams or visions that you have, ideas, just do it. Just go. What is the first thing you can do? What not what you can't do, but what do you have? What can you do? Focus on that. Do it. Don't get caught up so much on the equipment.
Don't compare yourself to others.
Don't compare yourself to others. Build yourself. Do what you can. Get creative and go.
Yeah. You said it. Just go.
I don't want to like backtrack at all, but I do want to emphasize one other thing that you said when you were talking about Hugh McLeod. Because it, like the aspect of, you know, honing in and focusing in and like really developing your skill and your focus as an artist is important too. Because when you're getting, especially when you're getting started, you're like, and you start to understand the technical for things, you're like, oh, well, this, if I got this, I can improve on this and that and this. But when you're getting started, if you have an idea, or if you want to be a filmmaker, you want to be a recording artist or an audio engineer, whatever your endeavor is, try early on to focus on finding your voice and finding your style.
Yeah.
Because that's going to save you a headache through the journey. Because you can go like, and you're going to have to sample things. It's like, just like you're talking about with the baby making sounds, like, you know, trying a bunch of things until you find what works for you. But keep that in mind, because it's going to help guide you in that journey, and it's going to prevent you from maybe going down some paths that were not necessary.
Mm-hmm. I want to add one more thing too. I think if you have an idea and you don't have the right equipment to do that idea, I think it's okay to take an idea and table it.
Sure.
But then go to the next idea and start that. I have film ideas that I've written down that I'm not ready to shoot, that I'm just kind of like keeping in the vault. Right. But that doesn't stop me from being a filmmaker and making other things that I can do now.
Right. Or taking that idea,
scaling it down,
finding a way.
Yeah.
Even if it's not something that you're going to put out, like say, then this has happened for me. Like I've had ideas for photo shoots where I'm like, oh, like, and I could see it in my head, like what I want the images to look like.
And you realized they were wax. So
right. I could see the pictures in my head, but I'm like, I know technically I can't achieve that.
Yeah.
So what's holding me back? Is it, if it's a gear thing, you know, then I've got to work my way up to the gear. If it's a knowledge thing and a skill thing, then I need to scale that idea down and try some things out. Try, like, if I want to take this, you know, amazing portrait that's lit this way and that way, but I don't really know how to achieve it, then I need to start breaking that idea down into individual elements and learning those things. Because when you have the opportunity to actually pursue that full idea, you know, when you have the idea or when you have the opportunity to really make that film that you have the idea for, you want to make sure that you're prepared and that your skills are there to meet you where the equipment and the opportunity is. So
you may want to open a barbershop, but you don't have all the equipment, but you do have some, but you can't do every haircut, but you can do one. And you can't do it in a barbershop, but you can do it
in your living room.
House calls.
You can do it in your dorm room in college, which is where I got my haircut. Yeah. You may want to start a restaurant, but you may not have that spot in the mall, or you may not have that spot in Stonebridge. You know, but you can pack up to-go boxes and go take orders at office buildings. And you may not be able to do 20 different recipes, but you can do 2. And you may not be able to do desserts, but you can have the best food that you can make. And you can do it now, and you could do that today. So I think that's what everybody needs to leave with. Sure, you may have those bigger visions, but how can you do that now and work your way to that vision and focus on what you do have and not get caught up in all of the other things that what other people are doing or how they're doing it. So if that's you, if you guys are good, man, I just my hope right now is that there's somebody on the end of this podcast going, all right, shut up, so I can just go. Do
Hopefully you turned this off.
I was going to say, hopefully it's gone already. Yeah.
So if that's you, we're done. Go do what it is you've always wanted to do. Get started.
Make it work.
If you want to reach out to us, we're here to help in any way that we can. We've got a decent amount of experience and skill in a broad spectrum of areas, if that even makes sense. But yep, shutting up now because I don't even make sense anymore. Thank you. Like, subscribe, follow, do all of those things. And then go do what it is you've always wanted to do because you can do it now.
Night, night.
You want to go night, night?